As long as I campaign and/or support Senate and House candidates within reason, they will win. I love the people, and they certainly seem to like the job I'm doing. If I find the time in between China, Iran, the economy, and much more, which I must, we will have a giant red wave. Well, the water is definitely rising, and it is not a blue wave by any stretch of the imagination. Joining us tonight, Ed Rollins, former Reagan White House political director, Great America PAC chairman, political strategist without peer, Fox Business political analyst, and Michael Goodwin, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, Fox Business contributor, columnist for the August New York Post. Well, gentlemen, you had quite a night, calling it right down the line. Ed, let's start with you. 5 for 5.
5 for 5 is a good night, and the bottom line here is when you have a special election like this in August, voters who turn out are the ones that win. And our side turned out, and there's another election in November, and the argument the Democrats are making is that we're going to lose in November because people are going to turn out in bigger numbers is all BS. It's just the president went out and endorsed some candidates. He picked a team that he wants as his players, and they're all going to be supportive of him, and they all won, and he turned the people on to go out and vote. He clearly made a difference in Ohio. He clearly made a difference in Kansas.
And you called it exactly in Ohio. I mean, this is extraordinary to see. Definitely a close race. Sure. But the Democrats already had Ohio, the 12th district, in their blue wave stratagem. If it's a stratagem, it's just a claim, which has fizzled to this point.
I think the key going forward, of course, is for the RNC and the various campaign committees to work more closely with the White House. I think that the president does make a difference, but you've got some of these candidates who are not, I think, forcefully on board with the president. We're talking earlier about Paul Ryan and his sort of holding his nose around Trump. I think there's still too much of that going on among these candidates. When the president is with you, and 90% of the Republicans are with you, you better be with the president if you want to get elected on the GOP line.
You went there very early, but we're going to talk about Paul Ryan. Jason Chaffetz will be with us here later. He's always excited when I talk about Paul Ryan. But the New York Times interview that he gave, if there was any doubt in the minds of anyone in the Republican Party about what a fatuous, shallow, delusional speaker he has been, that should have alone dispelled it.
Well, this was his farewell interview. Whether he thinks he's going to get another big interview with the New York Times or not is irrelevant. This, as far as I'm concerned, is the farewell. And what he basically said in the piece is, I saved the country from Donald Trump. He didn't say, I helped Donald Trump get a tax bill through, or Donald Trump got a tax bill for me, which certainly may happen. It was just...
Well, what happened is that Donald Trump drove and led the Republican Party's tax cut legislation, period.
And will continue to do so. The thing that I think that bothers me the most is someone that's run the congressional committee is what have you. The candidates aren't out there, and the incumbents are not wrapping themselves around Donald Trump and arguing Donald Trump's program, and they better do that or they're going to lose.
Yeah, to your point, and Ed has been talking about this for months now, the Republican Party has one choice if they wish to win. It's a choice that Paul Ryan hates, because this man would rather see the party go into disaster, to go off a cliff, than to embrace President Trump's agenda and his presidency. But they've got to do exactly that. His contract to make America great in their hands will make all the difference in the results, the outcome on November 6th.
Well, a writer named Henry Olson in a publication called American Greatness has a fascinating piece about the voters who switched from Obama to Trump. They are the key to these elections. It's not so much the Republican base as it is those Obama voters who came over because of Trump. That's why he won those blue states. That's why he flipped those 6 states. And if the Republican candidates across the country, if they go against that agenda, then they are not going to pick up those voters in their districts.
Right now, would you say, Ed, that this midterm election, going against history, everything else, is right now looking more like a blue wave, or is it looking like the Republican Party, it's their midterm to lose?
It's their midterm to lose. It has been for months and months and months. And there's the idea that you've got a president who's popular, 50%. You have an economy that's booming, and you're basically struggling. And the only reason you're struggling is because you're running lousy campaigns. And yesterday was a monumental day. Those 5 candidates you put up there are extraordinary candidates. We have an African-American former Iraq war veteran who's going to run in Michigan for
who is running,
who's now the nominee. That's an extraordinary, that's something unique in the Republican Party that we've never had before. And I just think Donald Trump is going to make a big, big difference.
Yeah,
Already has, but he's going to
I think that what is great, frankly, is that these candidates, irrespective of their religion, their race, these are Americans and they are Trump candidates. These are candidates who've aligned themselves, irrespective of background and circumstance. They are ready to represent their state, their district, their whatever the race they're in, to work with President Trump. Look, the Ryans and the McConnells have to face this. They might as well mop their brows with the dead hand of the past as continue in the direction they are. This is President Trump's party. It is President Trump's era. And everyone else, from the witch hunt led by Bob Mueller to the rhinos who are trying to undercut him, and the deep states who are trying to subvert the deep state that is trying to subvert the presidency, they're done. They're on the wrong side of history.
Well, and as we saw with these, when the president goes into a state and backs a candidate, that candidate benefits. Now, it may not be enough on all cases, but the benefit is clear. So the president can motivate voters better than anybody else in the party. And for anybody in the party to resist that is just foolish.
And the epitome was sending Bob Dole out after Trump had gone in and endorsed him. Bob Dole, a man I have a lot of respect for, but is my generation or beyond, send him in to try and counter the Trump endorsement. It was just a foolish effort and shows you how far out of touch they are with the American public.
Yeah. And by the way, there's not a single one talking about Paul Ryan and his contribution to the results in these elections, because he hasn't made any. Right. They're even making really dumb decisions about what they're doing with campaign money and the candidates that they're supporting. It is a disaster for this Republican Party if they don't get the speaker, this lame duck, out of that speakership and move straight ahead. This is Trump's party.
We're going to just say quickly, too, I mean, some of these Democratic candidates are saying they will not support Nancy Pelosi for speaker. Republicans need to have a speaker they can support on the campaign trail.
Well, I actually am supporting Nancy Pelosi for minority leader in perpetuity. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Michael. Thank you, Ed.
See you.